There are some ways that connect the dots, I think, in them. Did you forget Mr. FOGEL is the one where it's certainly a little bit younger person, but it's about the passage of time and about people that have gotten to a certain age and things have happened, and there's a certain amount of injustice involved in all of them. In the eviction of the artist, in the having to be 10 times better, and to be sort of shut out of certain things in his career, and in the incarceration, the wrongful incarceration of Mr. FOGEL. But what happened in all of them, I think there is putting a human face on history and making what we see in headlines, and this is what documentaries do so well, is making it personal. We see the headlines about Mr. FOGEL. We don't see about what's going on with Mr. Lee. We unearth these stories, and then we find out what's going on and get an inside view of the artist and what she's thinking, but at the same time she's facing an eviction, and after she's fought it for so long, and then finding new horizons in the place where she's forced to go. So in each case, there's a certain humanity involved. One at a time, I guess. We'll go through in order. How did you come onto the story of George Lee? How did you know about that story and want to tell it?
So I literally found George in the archives of the New York Public Library. I was doing research for another documentary that's in post-production now. It's called Beyond Yellowface. It's about getting rid of Asian tropes in ballet. So I was interested in the history of the Nutcracker. I was looking at photographs from the 1954 premiere of George Balanchine's Nutcracker for the New York City Ballet, which is arguably the gold standard. And I'm looking at these photographs of this young Asian dancer performing the Chinese dance, and I was surprised because 1954, I didn't know of any dancers of color with the New York City Ballet. And so I just really became obsessed with finding out who this George Lee was, because he never performed again for the New York City Ballet. So it took me 6 weeks to find him, but my previous life, I was a reporter and did a fair bit of investigative work. So I found him, and when I called him on the phone and left a message, he called me back. He said, you know, this is George Lee. He goes, why are you looking for me? I'm nobody. And actually that really broke my heart, because when he told me then his life story over the phone, I called my producing partner and I said, the other project, we have to put it aside. We must do a story about George Lee. And so I really found him in the library. So that was in November of 22, and we premiered in February of this year.
Okay, so the first thing, just on a basis of craft, it was wonderful, the setup when he's going to work, and all that scenery of Las Vegas, and it could have been any city until we saw the Four Queens, and then it became that, but it was in black and white, and when he walked through the doors, it goes into color, and that was just a beautiful transition. I just wanted to remark on that. Was there going to be a reunion of Flower Drum Song, or did you put that together? How did that come about?
That was just coincidental.
Really?
We were so
That's
fortunate.
Timing.
Yeah, they were supposed to have this reunion in the spring of 2020. And if you remember what we were doing in the spring of 2020. And so one of George's friends who had been in the Flower Drum Song, Helen Funai, she was organizing this event. And so just by sheer coincidence, it was happening in May of 23. So we, you know, when you're making independent film, it's very difficult financially, but we just said we have to be there. So we were just very lucky there.
No, it was a gift, an incredible gift, and what an opportunity for not only for them to get together and celebrate him as he should be celebrated, but even more so that you're there to film it for all of them and to put that together. Really remarkable. Yeah, actually, 4 months to 2 years. It was going to be 4 months to 2 years. He was going to be in the refugee camp for 4 months, and he was there for 2 years. Just the incredible perseverance of the man and the support of his mother the entire time. just absolutely remarkable. So a great story that, as I say, we would never know about this unless you stumbled onto it and told it to us. So really grateful for that. Well, moving on to Max, how did you come on the story of Mr. Fogel? What's your connection to that? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I was a student at AAS Moscow for 10 years. So I grew up in Russia. I lived there from age 3 to 13. I didn't have Mr. Fogel, but he taught my older sister. He taught all my friends that stayed in Moscow. So I knew Mr. Fogel. He literally like the best teacher at that school, and everybody knew it. Everybody wanted to take his class. There could be a whole separate documentary about Mr. Fogel's teaching style and how much everybody loved him. So anyway, I left Moscow, and my family moved back to America. I ended up going to film school at Chapman University in California, and the summer after my freshman year, that's when Mr. Fogel got arrested, and I knew about it. Everybody that went to AAS knew about it. But unless you had some sort of connection to him, you would have never heard the name Mr. Fogel. So, sophomore year goes by, junior year goes by, and I should mention I'm a documentary film major here, so it was kind of like in the back of my head all this time, and I saw Brittany Griner came home. Everybody, you can ask anybody, everybody knew who Brittany Griner was, Evan Gershkovich, but nobody knew Mark Fogel. So my senior year came around, so this was summer 2023, and I was in this class where we are funded by a donor to make a project of our choosing and are paired up with 3 different people, and this is the story I wanted to do. So I pitched it to the Fogel family, and they agreed, and then I pitched it to the class, and that's how it started.
Well, it came out beautifully, I have to say. In your film and in Jennifer's film, there is a little bit of use of animation. Was that easy or hard to come by? How did that serve your purposes, and how did you come to do that?
Yeah, the animation, there's just certain things that are, I'd say, more difficult to illustrate in a documentary, and like you don't want everything to be a talking head. You want it to be a little more interesting. So just kind of trying to think of ways to go about it. So my idea was of like opening the yearbook, and that was actually because like I had like the AAS yearbook just like at my house, and so I was just like, I think I was just like showing my group, yeah, like this is me, like 12 years old. And turn a couple pages, that's Mr. Fogel. And so, yeah, I don't know, I just had the idea of like turning through a yearbook because it's all teacher themed. And then to illustrate the back issues, which were really, really important for the context of the story, I didn't just want them to explain to you, speaking to you, that his back hurts, but to really show that it's been 40 years of intense spinal pain that has really, really upended his life.
Okay, and for you, Jennifer, the animation?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same reason. There are certain things that you can't convey just with a still photograph. And if I had video of George dancing as a child in Shanghai, I would have used that. So you turn to animation, and luckily my previous film, Beethoven in Beijing, which was also here in the festival in 2020, I had used animation. And so we used the same animator, and it just allows you to do things that you can't do with traditional imagery.
Yeah, well, I think that just to a little bit more on Mr. Fogel, a lot of the craft that was involved beyond the animation, the setting of the ticking clock in the very beginning, before we actually know what we're dealing with, but we know that this is going to have to do with the passage of time. And that came back several times. I think that was very effective. And also his mother commenting on something that we all think about now, especially documentary filmmakers, but other people too, is the loss of prints. We don't have hard copies anymore, and they're so important for memories and for other things. And the digital photos, they live on our phones, and we share them, we do them, but they're there and they're gone. There's no thing. And it was really telling that she said that. One last thing was these visual cues. It was lovely to see the birds flying over and their freedom, of course, but the little bits of cues, the visual cues, that really crafted very well and very, very strong emotional pitch. And I hope that there can be more attention to it and get him out. God knows. Moving on to the artist, let's talk about how did you come to, Kate, how did you come to be involved with the artist, and how did that come about? What happened there?
Oh, well, this is how I knew of Donna Dennis's work since the 1980s. And I had never met her, but I realized she lived in my neighborhood someplace. And one day Alan came home from the Chelsea Piers and said he met this wonderful woman in the hot tub. I said, what's her name? He said, she's a sculptor. Her name is Donna something. I said, Donna Dennis? He said, yes. And I was very excited, and I said, well, we have to have her over for dinner. And that was the beginning of a 10-year, 12-year, well, up till now, that was in 2011 or 12 or 13, and it went on for years. And we gave her advice on what kind of a video camera to put into her studio so she could kind of record her process of putting things together, and then so she could take them apart and put them into installations. And so she began filming over a period of 10 years, and we would go for dinner there, or she'd bring her card and her camera to our place, and I would take it off and put it on a hard drive, because I told her, you have to clone this, you have to protect it, and whatever you're going to do with it, you should have multiple copies of it. That's the nature of this digital world.
Right.
And so this went on until she showed me her journals. I heard someone sigh in the audience when you saw that wall of red books. And that's how it began.
Well, and the use of the journal was really incredible, both in terms of telling the story, very first person, then she's referring to the journals and what they do, and the whole thing, the amount of insight into the way her work works, because in so many cases, especially with more modern and more conceptual art, it's left to the viewer to figure it out. And sometimes there's text panels, there's other things that try and tell us to put it in context. But to have her insights and where it's coming from and how the metaphor develops in her mind, how it evolves based on certain things that happen to her or other things, was just absolutely fascinating to get inside the mind and the creative ideas of the artist. So you had the footage that was sort of existing, then you had, you went after the journals yourself, you filmed that.
Yes, we filmed the journals. We filmed her, we had another film, we filmed her at the Neuberger Museum.
Right.
With that.
And also the interviews.
And the interview, well, yep, the interviews.
So cutting all that together, was that?
And then cutting all that together, and then there were very little, when you saw those images in the front that were motion, they were all like contact sheets that were animated. That was that's motion effects, not necessarily animation. But that was because that's all we had. We couldn't find the photographer who did them, or we didn't have the negatives always, so we had to come up with solutions for seeing it.
Well, and the arc of the story that's told, I think it goes to the editing, goes to what's called the writing in documentaries, which is different from writing a screenplay, but the way it gets sewed together. But to start with the fact of her journal, which is the one entry, it's about when you're scared and blocked and there's no one to help you. And then it goes into what are the other fears? The fears that she won't be able to express what she wants to express, but it's also the fear that she's going to lose her apartment or her studio. And so as that goes through, and we go through the artistic process as well as the life process, and then get to this new place where she is. It's remarkable how much the studio looks like one of her little buildings, but on a large scale. That seems like a certain synchronicity there. So that was sort of intentional, the way that all evolved in that arc of the story, by putting the scared and blocked at the first part and then moving through.
Yes, I'm an artist also, and that totally appealed to me, that you're always, on Thursdays, it's self-doubt day. On Monday, you might feel a little bit better, but by Tuesday, you're questioning everything again. So that notion of certainty and doubt, and I've been seeing films here also where people are also talking about uncertainty and doubt and how it feeds creativity, and I think that was one of your ideas, too, in terms of structure. You might have come in and help me with the structure on that.
What I love about Donna is her honesty and directness, and the purity of that comes out in her work. And it was an unusual pleasure to work with her artistically and with a collegial collaborative relationship over time with no pressure. And I marveled at Kate's patience in that process and her vision of what could ensue eventually. And this is quite unlike the pressure that documentarians often feel from the closing walls of time and money. I also want to praise Jackie and her crew and the board. This is a remarkable film festival, which we are feeling so privileged to be present with. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of moving parts to put a film festival together. And you folks, whether audience or filmmakers, are of course part of it. But we have been around the circuit quite a lot over decades. And the Hamptons Doc Fest is truly remarkable, and your community must be very, very proud of it.
That's for sure. I wanted to ask one other question about Mr. Fogel. As I asked about the reunion, the phone call. How did that come about? Is that a regular occurrence? Is that something that he's allowed to do from time to time, and you would happen to be there for it, or you knew it was coming and you got to film it?
It was a little bit about, so sometimes it's a regular occurrence. Sometimes they'll let him call for, like every day for like 3 weeks. Other times he can't call for like a month, and then they don't know why. There's obviously no communication on that, and there's very little he can actually say on the call. So that's why there was that kind of pensive music in the background, because every little thing that you say could be very dangerous for him. But so that was actually the second time he called that day. The first time he called, and that's when Anne and Malphine told him, hey, the doc crew is here. So I got to talk to him for about 5 minutes, which was really, it was very difficult to describe, but it was a very emotional moment. I was just kind of, he doesn't really talk about like the past. He doesn't really talk about the future or the present. He can really only talk about the past. So I kind of told him all the students that I was going to be interviewing in London, and he was like, oh, really? Oh, that's great, that's great, that's great. I was like, so I'm also interviewing this person, this person. Oh, by the way, they're getting married. He's like, oh, no kidding, they're getting married. He was so excited to hear about his former students, because that's what really keeps him going, like students that are reaching out, all the people he's met all around the world teaching. And then at the end of the call, Anne told him, actually, he was the one that said, I'm going to try to call again later. So it was just it was going to be at some point later that day. We didn't know when. So it happened when we were filming that interview, and just when she was saying, like, he's a good human being, he deserves to be treated the same as any other person. That's not like a sound effect or anything. That's just when he called. And so we were ready to take the camera off the tripod and follow the conversation. And yeah, that's how that phone call came about.
Another gift from the universe that happened at that time. So we have, it's nice to see that Donna's settled in and she's doing this next thing, but for each of you, what's the future for your films? Where does this go from here? Where does this go from here, and so forth?
Yeah, so we're kind of coming at the end of the film festival circuit, and we receive funding from the Center for Asian American Media, so they're working with us to try to get a PBS broadcast, so hopefully sometime next year.
Well, let's hope that happens. And for you?
Yeah, so this is kind of the also end of our festival circuit. We might have a couple more coming up. But we've been doing kind of, like, this is an advocacy piece, so we've been doing screenings all over. We screened at the Capitol this summer. We screened in his hometown in Butler. We screened at the University of Pittsburgh. So it's kind of a combination of film festivals and screenings by people that knew him that are setting it up. So everybody's just kind of trying to come together to help out. We want to distribute this film. Just the whole point is to get as many people as possible to see it and to know Mark Fogel's name. And so we're working on that with a production company in LA, so hopefully something comes of that. And then long term, I think this could definitely be a feature documentary because the story's not finished. It's still ongoing. Obviously, he's still there. And I think that there's a really important story to be told there about just the current climate of international politics and how any person can fall victim to something so much bigger than themselves.
Okay. Well, I hope that does work out. And I'm not kidding about this, but I think that if you enlisted all the Steelers fans, you could get a lot of support that way. Because if he's a Steelers fan, those people are crazy. Yeah. And they can move a lot of heaven and earth. So
yeah, someone had a connection to Big Ben. They were trying to get him to say something about it. I think that happened actually like a week ago. So possibly stay tuned on that.
But I'm serious. I know a few of them, and they can do things, and there's a lot of them, so that can work. And that's international, actually. And the future for your film?
I suppose I would be into self-distribution. I'm looking for a distributor. There's museums and places that Donna would probably be able to exhibit it, but I'm moving on to other things.
Okay, what's next?
Well, I'm an artist, so I'm going back to that. And I'm also playing around with the notion of animation and art.
Okay.
Keep the art and the movie thing going together since I live this schizophrenic kind of life.
Well, I think that what you said about uncertainty is absolutely true. I mean, in every art form, and it can certainly yield new kinds of creativity, but it can also be a horrifying block to creativity. So it is an element for all of us that are in the creative fields. And great to bring attention to it. Great to bring attention to all these stories. It's incredible. I think we have time for a little bit of audience questions. I'm not sure, but please, right here.
How did Mark Vogel decide to go teach in Moscow?
So he had been teaching at international schools for his entire career. So before Moscow, he was in Oman, Thailand, Malaysia, Colombia, Pittsburgh for a while. The international school teaching career is a really fantastic career, and as a student of like an international school for 10 years, it's it's a very great place to be educated. So the Moscow school was one of the best international schools, and this was at a time when things were a lot more peaceful than they are now.
Is anyone else? Oh, up there.
In your film, she alluded to him being set up. So what was the background on that?
Yeah. Kids to school, so they'll do that in Russia. Like, it's so much bigger than he is. So they had people like working at the school. They like knew when he was gonna get in the airport. They knew the back surgery he got in Pittsburgh. It's so like deeply connected, and that's what I mean when I say something so much bigger than himself, because they do this to get something out of the United States government.
Right here.
George Lee repeats a number of times he did what he did to pay the bills. He worked out of necessity. The finances of your artist are mysterious to me. Her pieces are so big, and the installations, I mean, all that goes into it beyond her concept. What can you say about the finances? How does she make that?
If you go to her website, it's called donnadennisart.com. You'll see all of the grants and awards that she's gotten over her lifetime. But now, since the film came out, she had a big show, a kind of retrospective show at O'Flaherty's, a very hip gallery that was on First Avenue, or was it A, in 4th Street. It's since closed and moved to a different location, but it's run by very this group of people who are very into the art world and know how to sell, and also are artists themselves. And so they sold 3 of her pieces. One of the cabins, the 2-story house that was at the beginning of the film, and another little cabin that it wasn't in the film, might have been as a slide. And they were all one is going to the Metropolitan Museum. one is going to the Albright Knox Museum and another to a couple who are collectors. But she also has a foundation herself. And it was a mystery to me, too. I was fascinated. See, for me, it was a labor of love, and I really didn't get paid to make the film. But I just loved her and her work, and it's a mystery. But I wish her all the best. And also when she got a settlement from her loft, because she fought them for 30 years, and so finally they were paying off all the different people, and she was down to the last one holding out, and they paid her to leave. And that was her golden parachute to get her to Columbia County. So.
Just to mention, her work was also out here all summer. It was at the ranch at Montauk, and I think there may be another showing of that piece. It was Coney Island, or I can't remember. It was one of the big girder, the maze kind of piece. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking on the name of it. Anyway, we went out there with her niece Elena
To the ranch?
to Montauk, and if I'm not mistaken,
It was Deep Station.
Deep
The
Station.
subway.
Yeah, fabulous, fabulous piece. Sorry it wasn't better publicized maybe for people to see it, but I think it may have sparked interest in perhaps other shows of her work out here. I hope so. So it's a
So
wonderful
too, because the film will
piece.
follow it.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go. You have any more? Wait, right here.
I noticed that the first three films, they were all single. They weren't married. The subjects of the first three films, they were never married.
Oh, so George never married. He was engaged, but she broke it off because he was traveling all the time. So yeah, he's single.
Mark Fogel's not single. He has a wife and 2 kids. But so you're probably wondering why they're not in the film. Because this is like an ongoing. They were there in Pittsburgh when we were filming, but it really came down to the wire whether or not they were going to be in the film, and they decided at the eventually not to. It was just really, really too much, and I kind of agree with that because I don't know, because his kids are my age, so if that was my dad there, I don't really think I could be able to sit on camera and spill my guts out in hoping that it would help. You know what I mean? So Anne and Malphine and Lisa, still his sisters and mom, it was very, very difficult for them too. But so that's why his immediate family's not in the film.
Oh, and Donna Dennis has a boyfriend she's had for decades. Viva l'amore, eh?
So, wait, we have more.
Yeah, it's not a question, but I wanted to comment on how your movie ended with George Lee. I love that at the end you had him move, because that's the first time in the movie where you see the dancer in him as an older person. And that was very dramatic, and it's right in at the end. Plus, I think you just did him a wonderful service to show him to the world, and he felt he was nothing.
Well, thank you for that. And so he was doing the port-de-bras for the Bluebird pas de deux because he can barely stand, but he just retired last month. And he turns 90 in February.
So we can't go and try and beat the house against George? Okay. Well, thank you for bringing attention to all these people and to all their situations and showing us so much. Thank you very much.